Hello, I'm Martyn Warwick of TelecomTV. We're here in trendy Chelsea in London with some trendy Chelsea traffic going past. It's quite noisy. Anyway, I'm talking with Dean Bubley, who is the founder of Disruptive Analysis. So Dean, WebRTC is generally considered to be very strictly browser-based, but in fact, it could well have other uses and applications. What's your view on this? Is it going to be embedded in all sorts of terminal equipment?
I think it's going to be embedded not just in terminal equipment, but also in mobile apps. And I think that the idea that it is purely a browser-based technology or even API stems from the original view about 3 years ago, and that's the sort of, if you like, the browser and web purist view of the world. Since then, an awful lot has happened, and actually there's also some stuff that hasn't happened, notably adoption on iOS devices or many Android devices. And so what we've seen is various mechanisms to build WebRTC sort of media capabilities, voice, video, and so on, into native applications, particularly on mobile devices, phones and tablets, but also in some cases on PCs. And that does two things. Firstly, it gets around the limitations on browser support, which are still prevalent, particularly from Apple and Microsoft. But also, it gets around some of the limitations of the browser itself. The browser is not always the best application for communications. You know, what someone I spoke to amusingly said, "How do I tell which of my browser tabs is ringing at me?" And there's like lots of little things of what happens when you press the back button, and how does it work with bookmarks. And sometimes it might be better to wrap up the capabilities of WebRTC either into an application which, if you like, is a hybrid browser and native app, or completely turn it into a new set of APIs and use primarily the WebRTC media and network protocols. So that's the things which allow the streams of video and voice to get around firewalls, the definitions on codecs and so forth. And rather than necessarily be purist about the specific JavaScript APIs. And so that's mobile apps. Devices, we're also starting to see WebRTC appear in things. Now, the thing here is that WebRTC is not just voice and video, it's also real-time data. And so, for example, the Google Chromecast dongle, which allows you to stream video from some sites from a laptop to a TV, using the HDMI port, that actually uses a bit of the WebRTC capability inside it, and that's a $30 piece of plastic with no screen. We're also starting to see some desk phones for enterprise use which use the same codecs, and I suspect we'll see other devices, maybe in future in cars, or you can certainly devices where you have cameras, microphones, screens. One of my research reports was actually bought by a well-known hi-fi company. So maybe we're going to be getting WebRTC karaoke, or someone shouting at Simon Cowell or something in the not too distant future.
Okay, when we're on that sort of subject thing, do you think WebRTC is going to have a major role to play in M2M and the Internet of Things?
Yes, I think it's going to be two separate domains. There's going to be devices which have cameras and or screens, and there's going to be devices which are real-time streaming data. And so I think, for example, for things which are more sensor-like, there's going to be use of the WebRTC data channel capabilities in various contexts. And it might be variations on a theme there, because they're going to be non-screen devices, so the concept of a browser doesn't make as much sense. But I think the other side of machine-to-machine, where you do have visual input, either with the camera, perhaps audio, and you've got output on a screen, there you're going to see it could be advertising hoardings, it could be in vehicle devices. For example, one use case I've heard about is for truck drivers who have a in-truck telematics terminal, and rather than using a mobile phone separately to call the warehouse they're about to deliver to, they could have the voice or even video capability embedded into the same terminal using the same data connection. And given it's M2M, there may be special deals done on roaming. So it could vastly simplify things for the logistics company there. And you can imagine once you've got that in there, there's other stuff you could do. You could have CCTV for security of the vehicle. You could have a sort of real-time, how's my driving check. It depends on how big brother you want to go from it. And the same thing, there's going to be devices that are industrial oriented, potentially stuff in the smart home as well, where audio, video capabilities are valuable. In fact, audio doesn't have to even be human speech. It can be breathing, or it could be something to do with your pulse for medical diagnostics. And so when you think about combining this with wearables, you could have everything from something which analyzes your breathing patterns or snoring to something which is analyzing your golf swing.
As far as WebRTC is concerned, it's all happening at the same time as more and more cloud delivery, the emergence of NFV, networks, functions, virtualization, and so on. What effects are those other changes within the industry having on WebRTC, and what's happening in terms of carrier and enterprise implementation? That's
interesting. I mean, enterprise in general is one of the areas which is leading the way on WebRTC already. If you look at where there are existing deployments in the wild, they're for things like customer service and call centres. Amazon Mayday is partly based on WebRTC. There's other platforms from companies like Zendesk and LiveOps for customer interaction, and that fits into the sort of the future model of cloud delivered customer interaction services. But there's also more generally in the enterprise space three other things that are occurring. Unified communications, UC, which is sort of evolved out of IPPBXs and hosted services, that is slowly becoming cloudified as well. And so you're finding still some premise-based systems, but you're seeing more and more being adopted on a cloud basis, either by traditional telcos or by third-party service providers. Then there's conferencing, various sorts of conferencing, whether it's video conferencing, web conferencing, audio conferencing, which is sort of also being bundled into UC in a lot of cases. And that is also swiftly moving to the cloud, and the sales of sort of room-based systems have pretty much sort of plateaued and starting to fall. And people are adopting video conferencing either, which is the sort of very low-end, cheap, free Google Hangouts type thing, but also increasingly sort of mid-scale, cloud-delivered, either room or PC-based, or increasingly tablet-based conferencing, where some of the quite expensive infrastructure, like the multi-point control units, the MCUs, they are in the cloud, and the cloud is doing the sort of video mixing, maybe video bridging services. There's already at least one service provider video conferencing service which has WebRTC as one of the paths to connect into it, as well as other mechanisms, and that's Interroute in Europe that has, I believe, launched that in the last few months, and I'd expect others to follow suit. The other side is where you've got communications embedded into applications directly. So it could be embedded into a future version of SAP or Salesforce, or a line of business application in the hotel industry, or there's a lot of interest in the medical and financial services businesses there as well, particularly around online banking and secure telemedicine, because the WebRTC is encrypted. It alters the economics as well of medical services being delivered to remote patients more effectively, or various other things where, if you like, some of the business case may be justified on insurance costs or lowered costs of health delivery. For example, you can imagine someone having a video call once a day with a nurse who can watch them taking their pills and their medication. Because one of the big problems with a lot of healthcare is people don't always take their prescriptions, and so you can imagine that video, you've got some pretty good evidence that that's being done. Your compliance rates will go up. Now, in terms of the service providers there, there's various opportunities. I mean, some of it is providing the sort of platform play for the application integration. That's what Telefonica has done with TalkBox. Others, it may be either working with partners who are, say, maybe video conferencing specialists or unified communication specialists to offer hosted services which have WebRTC either as one of or the main way of accessing those services. So there certainly are going to be certain functions when delivering to enterprise that are going to be cloud-based. In some cases, they're going to be standalone islands of communications embedded in an application, maybe for a security or CCTV function. Other cases on, say, conferencing in UC or delivering webinars as a service, for example, then there's going to make sense to have that integrated with the existing sort of phone network or IMS core or whatever it happens to be. And so there's going to be different use cases. I think one of the really important things here is WebRTC and to a degree service innovation for telcos generally is going to be quite use case specific. And it's going to be those services which service providers actually understand, they can build, not just have the software right, but also I think one of the other really important things is they have the design and the user interaction right. There's too few service providers have, if you like, someone with the job title of Chief Design Officer. And I think that needs to go hand in hand with the software architecture. And I think that's where the service providers have to aim, is to think not just minutes of voice or even minutes of video, but why is someone talking? Why is someone doing an interview or a video call? And how can a much broader solution be built around that, rather than just the sort of shipping bits from point A to point B, because that's not going to be the valuable bit.
Dean Bubley, great depth of knowledge. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.